In a quiet, suburban town, one boy's school day turns into a nightmare, unraveling a web of secrets, betrayal, and unimaginable courage. What happened behind the walls of the school that led to a life-changing moment? Watch until the end to uncover the truth and share your thoughts in the comments. How would you stand up for someone you love? Don't forget to like and subscribe to support stories that matter. The morning sun streamed through the curtains of the Carter family home, casting a golden glow across the breakfast table. Andrew Carter, a 12-year-old boy with a bright mind and a shy demeanor, sat quietly, picking at his scrambled eggs. His mother, Lauren, moved around the kitchen with her usual efficiency, preparing lunches and checking her to-do list. She noticed Andrew's silence and exchanged a concerned glance with her husband, Alex, who was sipping his coffee at the counter in his police uniform. "Andrew, honey, you've barely touched your breakfast," Lauren said, her voice laced with motherly concern. "You'll need your energy for school." Andrew shrugged without looking up. "I'm not hungry." Alex placed his mug down and turned to face his son. "You've been quiet all week, buddy. Is something going on?" Andrew hesitated, his fork hovering over his plate. For a moment, it seemed like he might dismiss the question with a quick excuse, but then his shoulders slumped. "I don't want to go to school." Both parents froze. Andrew wasn't the type to avoid responsibility. Lauren pulled out a chair and sat beside him. "Why not? Did something happen?" Andrew stared at his plate, his voice barely a whisper. "They keep picking on me." Alex's brows furrowed. "Who's picking on you?" Andrew hesitated, then mumbled, "Sam, Tom, and Allison. They're always making fun of me, because I'm the only black kid in class." Lauren gasped softly, and Alex clenched his fist, fighting the surge of anger building inside him. "What exactly do they say?" Alex asked, keeping his tone steady. Andrew swallowed hard. "They call me names. Say I don't belong at the school. Yesterday they stole my lunch and put something gross in it. I didn't eat much, but I felt really sick after." Lauren's face turned pale as she reached for her son's hand. "Andrew, why didn't you tell us this sooner?" Tears welled in Andrew's eyes. "I didn't want to make things worse. If they find out I told, they'll just do more." Alex crouched to meet Andrew's gaze. "You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. We're your parents. It's our job to protect you." Andrew wiped his eyes and nodded weakly. "I just don't want to go today." Alex exchanged a look with Lauren, who gave a small nod of understanding. Alex placed a hand on Andrew's shoulder. "I'm going to talk to your principal about this, but for now, let's get through today, all right? I'll drop you off and keep an eye on things." Andrew reluctantly agreed, grabbing his backpack. As they left the house, Lauren watched them from the window, her heart heavy with worry. The drive to school was quiet, tension hanging in the air. Alex tried to reassure his son. "You're brave, Andrew. We'll make this right." At the school, Alex parked the car and watched Andrew walk toward the entrance. His son's shoulders were hunched, his steps hesitant. Alex's gut told him something was wrong, but he didn't press further, trusting Andrew's words. After Andrew disappeared into the building, Alex drove to work, but the image of his son's troubled expression lingered in his mind. He resolved to follow up with the school administration that day, determined to confront the issue head-on. However, duty called, and Alex soon found himself absorbed in routine patrol tasks, writing tickets and responding to calls. Yet, no matter how busy he became, the worry gnawed at him. Unbeknownst to Alex, Andrew's fears had not been exaggerated. In class, he sat alone, avoiding eye contact with anyone. During lunch, the taunts began again. Sam and Tom snickered as they walked by his table, whispering insults just loud enough for Andrew to hear. Allison joined in, her voice dripping with mockery. "Enjoy your lunch, Andrew. Hope it doesn't taste funny." Andrew's stomach churned. He stared at his food, suspicious of their intentions, but hunger won out. He ate cautiously, picking at the edges of his sandwich. By the time lunch was over, he felt a wave of nausea. He asked to go to the nurse's office, but collapsed in the hallway before he could make it there. The next moments were a blur. His teacher, Miss Clark, rushed to his side, her calm professionalism hiding the panic she felt. She checked his pulse and called for help, but when no ambulance arrived quickly enough, she made a decision. Without hesitation, she carried Andrew to her car and drove him to the nearest hospital, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. At the same time, Alex was patrolling the streets when he noticed a car speeding dangerously through an intersection. Flipping on his siren, he pursued the vehicle, pulling it over after a brief chase. He approached the driver's window, ready to issue a citation, when the sight of Miss Clark behind the wheel stopped him in his tracks. "Officer Carter," she said breathlessly. "It's Andrew. He's in the back seat. I couldn't wait for the ambulance." Alex's heart dropped as he looked into the back seat and saw his son, unconscious and pale, barely breathing. The world seemed to tilt, and a cold dread settled in his chest. Without another word, Alex jumped into the passenger seat, and Miss Clark sped toward the hospital. Every second felt like an eternity as Alex gripped the dashboard, his mind racing with fear and questions. How had this happened? What had those kids done to his son? When they arrived at the hospital, Alex carried Andrew inside, his voice hoarse as he demanded immediate help. Miss Clark stayed close, explaining everything she knew to the medical staff. As Andrew was whisked away for emergency treatment, Alex stood frozen in the hallway, his mind replaying every sign he had missed, every opportunity to protect his son that he hadn't taken. Miss Clark placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "He's strong, Officer Carter. He'll get through this." Alex nodded, though his throat felt tight. "Thank you for getting him here." As they waited for news, Alex vowed to uncover the truth about what had happened and to ensure those responsible faced justice. His son's life had been upended, but Alex would do everything in his power to make sure it wasn't destroyed. The hospital waiting room buzzed with subdued conversations and the distant hum of medical equipment, a background noise that only seemed to amplify the anxiety in Alex Carter's chest. He paced back and forth, glancing periodically at the doors leading to the emergency department where his son, Andrew, was being treated. Miss Clark sat nearby, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, her usually composed demeanor cracked by the tension of the moment. Every passing second felt like an eternity. Alex's mind raced, replaying the events of the past hour. The image of Andrew's pale face as he lay unconscious in Miss Clark's car haunted him. He couldn't shake the sense of guilt that gnawed at him. How had it come to this? How had he missed the signs that his son's school life had become a battlefield? The doors to the emergency room swung open, and a doctor in scrubs stepped out, his expression professional but serious. "Officer Carter," he called out, glancing between Alex and Miss Clark. Both rose to their feet immediately. Alex's heart pounded as he stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Mendez," the doctor introduced himself. "Andrew is stable for now, but his condition is critical. The toxic substance he ingested caused significant damage to his kidneys. We've stabilized his vitals, but he's going to need a kidney transplant as soon as possible." Alex felt the air leave his lungs. A transplant? How soon?" His voice wavered despite his attempt to remain composed. "Soon," Dr. Mendez emphasized. "His kidneys are failing rapidly, and we don't have much time. We'll begin by testing immediate family members to see if there's a match." Miss Clark's voice broke the tense silence. "How did this happen? What kind of substance was it?" Dr. Mendez hesitated. "We're running toxicology tests to identify exactly what he ingested, but it's clear the dose was deliberate. This wasn't accidental." The words hit Alex like a physical blow. Someone had done this to his son intentionally. His fists clenched at his sides as rage surged within him, but he forced himself to focus. "Start with me," he said firmly. "Test me for compatibility." Lauren arrived moments later, her face pale and drawn with worry. Alex quickly caught her up on the situation, and they both submitted blood samples for testing. The wait was agonizing. The minutes dragged by as the family sat in silence, broken only by the occasional whisper of reassurance between Alex and Lauren. Miss Clark, who had remained in the background, finally spoke. "Officer Carter, I need to tell you something about what's been happening at school." Alex turned to her, his jaw tight. "Go on." She took a deep breath, her voice steady but heavy with regret. "Andrew has been targeted by a group of students, Sam, Tom, and Allison. I've reported their behavior to the administration multiple times, but no meaningful action has been taken. Yesterday, I saw them near Andrew's lunch. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now—" Her words trailed off and Alex's anger boiled over. "They've been bullying him for months, and you knew? Why didn't anyone tell me?" Miss Clark met his gaze, her eyes filled with guilt. "I tried to handle it through the proper channels, but the school, they protect those kids. Their families are significant donors. The administration swept it under the rug." Lauren let out a soft gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. "They knew and did nothing? Our son is lying in there because of their negligence," Dr. Mendez returned, cutting through the rising tension. His face carried a mix of sympathy and determination. "I'm sorry, but neither of you are a match for Andrew's transplant." The words felt like a death sentence. Alex's legs wobbled, and he leaned against the wall for support. "What do we do now?" he whispered. "We'll place him on the transplant list," Dr. Mendez explained, "but finding a compatible donor quickly is critical. We'll also begin testing close family members and friends. The more people we can test, the better." Miss Clark stepped forward. "Test me," she said without hesitation. Alex and Lauren both turned to her, stunned. "You don't have to do this," Lauren said, her voice trembling. "Yes, I do," Miss Clark replied firmly. "Andrew is a wonderful kid. He doesn't deserve this. If I can help, I want to." The doctor nodded. "We'll test you right away." As Miss Clark was led away to the lab, Alex and Lauren sat in silence, their thoughts swirling with worry, fear, and a glimmer of hope. Alex replayed Miss Clark's words about the school's negligence, and his resolve hardened. He would not let this go. Justice would be served, both for Andrew and for any other child who had suffered in silence. Hours later, Miss Clark returned, looking pale but resolute. Dr. Mendez followed close behind, holding a clipboard. "Miss Clark is a compatible match," he announced. Relief washed over Alex and Lauren, but it was tempered by the enormity of what Miss Clark was offering. "Are you sure about this?" Alex asked her. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. "I can't change what's happened to Andrew, but I can help him now. That's all that matters." Preparations for the surgery began immediately. Miss Clark was taken to a separate room to undergo final evaluations, while Alex and Lauren sat by Andrew's bedside, their hearts heavy with gratitude and fear. The sight of their son, so small and fragile amid the hospital machines, only deepened their resolve. As the surgical team prepared, Alex made a silent promise to himself. He would find out who had done this to Andrew, and they would face the consequences. But first, his priority was ensuring his son's survival. He reached for Lauren's hand, and together they waited, holding on to hope. The soft beeping of monitors and the hum of fluorescent lights filled the quiet hospital room as Andrew lay unconscious, his face pale and his small body seemingly lost among the medical equipment surrounding him. Alex and Lauren sat by his bedside, their hands intertwined as they silently willed their son to hold on. Every now and then, a nurse would enter, checking the monitors and making adjustments, offering a small smile of reassurance before leaving them alone again. Down the hall, Miss Clark sat in a waiting room, her mind racing with a mixture of emotions. She had been cleared as a donor, and the medical team was now preparing for the transplant. Her decision to step forward had been immediate and instinctual, but the reality of the situation was sinking in. Yet, as fear crept into her thoughts, it was quickly overshadowed by her determination. She thought of Andrew's bright smile in class, his inquisitive nature, and the quiet resilience he showed despite the bullying he endured. She couldn't let him down. Dr. Mendez entered the room, his presence breaking through her thoughts. "Miss Clark, the surgical team is ready for you. I need to remind you that while this procedure is generally safe, it does carry risks. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed?" Miss Clark nodded without hesitation. "I'm sure. Let's do this." Meanwhile, Alex was pacing the hallway outside Andrew's room, his thoughts clouded with guilt and anger. The information Miss Clark had shared about the bullying replayed in his mind like a broken record. He couldn't believe the school had ignored such blatant cruelty. The thought of Sam, Tom, and Allison going unpunished while his son fought for his life was unbearable. Lauren stepped into the hallway, her face etched with worry. "Alex, you need to calm down," she said softly. "This isn't helping Andrew." "I know," Alex replied, running a hand through his hair. "But I can't just sit here and do nothing. Those kids, what they did—" He clenched his fists, his voice trailing off. Lauren placed a hand on his arm. "We'll deal with that, but right now, our focus has to be on Andrew. He needs us here." Alex nodded reluctantly, pulling her into a brief embrace. "You're right, I hate feeling so helpless." As they returned to Andrew's bedside, a nurse entered to update them on Miss Clark's progress. "The donor surgery is about to begin. Miss Clark is doing well, and the team is optimistic." "Thank you," Lauren said, her voice shaky with gratitude. Once the nurse left, she turned to Alex. "I can't believe she's doing this for him. She's given Andrew a second chance at life." Alex sat down heavily, staring at his son. "I didn't see it, Lauren. I didn't see how bad things were for him. I should have—" Lauren interrupted him, her voice firm. "Alex, we both missed it. But now we know, and we're doing everything we can to make it right." Hours passed in agonizing slowness. Every tick of the clock seemed to stretch on forever. Alex found himself lost in memories of Andrew as a toddler, laughing and running through the park, his boundless energy and joy lighting up their lives. He couldn't reconcile that image with the fragile boy lying in the hospital bed before him. Eventually, Dr. Mendez returned, his expression calm but serious. Alex and Lauren stood immediately, their hearts pounding. "The donor surgery was successful," he began. "Miss Clark is in recovery and doing well. We're starting the transplant procedure on Andrew now. It will take several hours, but so far, everything is going according to plan." Relief washed over them, though it was tempered by the weight of what lay ahead. Alex thanked the doctor before sitting down again, his knees feeling weak. "She's really doing it," he said softly. "She's saving his life." Lauren nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We'll never be able to repay her for this." As the hours dragged on, Alex's resolve hardened. Once Andrew was stable, he would focus on holding the school and the bullies accountable. He thought of the principal, the administrators, and the parents who had turned a blind eye to the bullying. Their inaction had nearly cost his son his life. That wasn't something he could let slide. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Mendez returned again, his expression more relaxed. "The transplant is complete," he announced. "Andrew is stable, and the new kidney is functioning as expected. He'll need time to recover and remain under close observation, but the surgery was a success." Alex and Lauren hugged each other tightly, tears of relief flowing freely. "Can we see him?" Alex asked. "He's still under anesthesia, but you can sit with him," Dr. Mendez said. "We'll continue to monitor him closely over the next 24 to 48 hours for any signs of complications." When Alex and Lauren entered Andrew's room, they were met with the sight of their son still hooked up to machines, but looking more peaceful than he had earlier. The knowledge that he had been given another chance filled them with overwhelming gratitude. In another part of the hospital, Miss Clark lay in her recovery bed, exhausted but content. She had done what she set out to do, and knowing that Andrew had a fighting chance made every discomfort worth it. A nurse checked on her, offering a reassuring smile. "You did something incredible today," the nurse said. Miss Clark nodded, her thoughts drifting to Andrew and the Carters. She hoped he would grow up to realize his potential, free from the cruelty of those who sought to tear him down. She silently vowed to continue fighting for him, not just as his teacher, but as someone who believed in his future. Back in Andrew's room, Alex sat beside his son, holding his hand. "We've got a long road ahead, buddy," he murmured, "but you're not alone. We're here, and we're going to make sure this never happens again." The room was filled with quiet determination and love, the first steps toward healing for Andrew and his family. Alex knew the battle wasn't over, but for the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. As the first light of morning filtered through the hospital blinds, Alex Carter stood in the hallway outside Andrew's room. His son was stable, and Miss Clark was recovering well, but the weight of the situation still pressed heavily on his shoulders. The image of Andrew lying in his hospital bed haunted him, and the knowledge that his school had allowed this to happen filled him with simmering anger. He couldn't rest until he had answers. With a determined nod to Lauren, who was sitting beside Andrew, Alex left the hospital, his mind set on uncovering the truth. The drive to the school was filled with a tense silence. Alex's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he replayed Miss Clark's words in his head. The school administration had known about the bullying, but had done nothing to stop it. The principal, the teachers, and even some parents had failed Andrew, and now he was fighting for his life because of their negligence. When Alex arrived at the school, the familiar sights of the parking lot and the front entrance felt foreign and hostile. He parked his car and strode toward the building, his police badge clipped to his belt. As he entered the front office, the staff looked up in surprise. The principal, Mr. Daniels, was called over, his expression nervous as he approached. "Officer Carter," Mr. Daniels said, his voice attempting a calm professionalism, How is Andrew?" Alex's jaw tightened as he fixed the man with a steely glare. "He's stable, but he needed a kidney transplant to survive. I'm here to find out why that happened." The principal shifted uncomfortably. I assure you, we take bullying very seriously here. We've implemented numerous programs." Alex cut him off, his voice sharp. "Programs don't mean anything if they aren't enforced. Andrew told us he's been bullied for months, and Miss Clark confirmed she's reported it multiple times. Why didn't you act?" Mr. Daniels opened his mouth to respond, but faltered under Alex's intense gaze. Finally, he sighed and gestured toward his office. "Let's discuss this privately." Alex followed him into the office, where the door was closed firmly behind them. "I don't need excuses," Alex said, leaning forward on the desk. "I need answers. Miss Clark told me that Sam, Tom, and Allison were the ones bullying Andrew. She also said their families are significant donors. Is that why you've been protecting them?" Mr. Daniels' face turned pale. "It's not like that," he protested weakly. "We've been trying to address the situation without escalating it unnecessarily." "Unnecessarily?" Alex's voice rose. "My son nearly died because of what they did. If putting his life at risk isn't reason enough to escalate, what is?" The principal's hands trembled as he adjusted his glasses. "We didn't know it was this serious. We thought—" "You thought wrong," Alex snapped, "and now you're going to face the consequences of your inaction." Just then, the door opened, and Miss Clark stepped in, her face resolute despite the evident strain of her recovery. "Officer Carter," she said, her voice steady, "I wanted to be here for this conversation. I have records of every report I made about the bullying." She handed a folder to Alex, who opened it and scanned the contents. Each report was a detailed account of the incidents, dated and signed. "This is all the proof I need," Alex said, turning back to Mr. Daniels. "You ignored every one of these reports. You failed to protect my son." The principal's shoulders sagged under the weight of his guilt. "What do you want me to do?" "For starters," Alex said, his voice firm, "you're going to cooperate fully with the police investigation. You're going to provide every piece of evidence you have, security footage, witness statements, everything, and you're going to ensure those kids face the consequences of their actions." Mr. Daniels nodded slowly, his resistance crumbling. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Alex turned to Miss Clark. "Thank you for coming forward with this. Your bravery is the reason we have a chance to get justice for Andrew." Miss Clark nodded. "I'll testify if needed. This isn't just about Andrew. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." As they left the office, Alex felt a mix of relief and determination. The principal's cooperation was a step in the right direction, but the fight was far from over. He needed to build a solid case against the bullies and their families to ensure they couldn't simply buy their way out of trouble. Later that day, Alex met with Bradley, his superior officer, to review the evidence gathered so far. The CCTV footage from the school showed Sam, Tom, and Allison near Andrew's lunchbox just before lunch. Though the actual tampering wasn't caught on camera, their behavior was suspicious enough to warrant further investigation. Witnesses confirmed they had seen the trio mocking Andrew and laughing as he ate his lunch. "We've got enough to press charges," Bradley said, his tone serious. "But you need to be prepared. Their families will fight this every step of the way." "I'm ready," Alex replied, "whatever it takes." As he returned to the hospital that evening, Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was determined to see it through. When he walked into Andrew's room, he found Lauren sitting beside their son, who was now awake and alert. "Dad?" Andrew's voice was soft but steady. "What's going to happen to them?" Alex sat down beside him, taking his hand. "We're going to make sure they can't hurt anyone else. You don't need to worry about them anymore." Andrew nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. "Thanks, Dad." As the family sat together, Alex made a silent vow. He would do everything in his power to protect Andrew and to fight for justice. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time he felt that they had the strength to win. The soft hum of hospital machines filled Andrew's room as Alex and Lauren sat beside their son. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions, from the fear of losing Andrew to the relief of a successful transplant. Miss Clark's extraordinary act of kindness had given their son a second chance at life, and Alex was determined to make sure that no one else would ever have to face what Andrew had endured. However, the fight was far from over. The school, the bullies, and their families still had to be held accountable, and Alex wasn't going to rest until justice was served. Andrew stirred in his bed, his eyes fluttering open. His face still looked pale, but there was a glimmer of strength returning to him. Lauren leaned forward, brushing his hair gently away from his forehead. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Andrew gave a weak smile. "Tired, but better," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Alex leaned closer, his voice filled with determination. "You're doing great, buddy. We're so proud of you. And I promise you we're taking care of everything. You don't have to worry about anything." Andrew's gaze flickered between his parents, a hint of anxiety in his eyes. "What about Sam, Tom, and Allison?" he asked hesitantly. "Are they in trouble?" Alex exchanged a glance with Lauren before answering. "Yes, they are. We've gathered evidence, and the police are involved now. They won't get away with what they did to you." Andrew nodded slowly, though his expression remained troubled. "I don't want anyone else to go through what I did." Lauren's eyes filled with tears as she kissed Andrew's forehead. "You're such a brave boy," she whispered, "and we're going to make sure this never happens again." As Andrew drifted back to sleep, Alex felt a surge of resolve. He left the room, stepping into the hallway where his superior officer, Bradley, was waiting. "Any updates on the case?" Alex asked. Bradley nodded, handing over a file. "We've got statements from witnesses, including Miss Clark and a few other students who've come forward. The footage from the cafeteria shows enough to support the claims. We're recommending charges of reckless endangerment and assault against the 3 kids. Their families are already scrambling to control the damage." Alex flipped through the file, scanning the evidence. The reports painted a clear picture of the bullying Andrew had endured and the school's failure to act. "What about the school?" he asked. "They ignored this for months." "We've filed a formal complaint with the district," Bradley replied. "The principal is under investigation and the school board is reviewing their policies. This case has gotten a lot of attention and they can't sweep it under the rug anymore." Alex nodded, satisfied but not yet at ease. "Good. But we need to keep the pressure on. These families have money and influence, and they'll use every resource to protect their kids." Bradley placed a reassuring hand on Alex's shoulder. "We've got your back on this. Just focus on your family right now. We'll handle the rest." After thanking Bradley, Alex returned to Andrew's room. Lauren was sitting by the bed reading a story to their son, who listened with a small smile on his face. Seeing them together brought a sense of calm to Alex's turbulent thoughts. For now, Andrew was safe, and that was what mattered most. Later that evening, Alex and Lauren visited Miss Clark, who was recovering in her own hospital room. She looked pale but cheerful as they entered. "Officer Carter, Mrs. Carter," she greeted them warmly. "How's Andrew?" "He's doing much better," Lauren said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thanks to you. We can never thank you enough for what you've done." Miss Clark shook her head. "You don't need to thank me. I'm just glad I could help. Andrew is an incredible kid. He deserves to grow up and achieve great things." Alex stepped forward, his expression serious. "You didn't just help him, Miss Clark. You saved his life, and we're going to make sure the people responsible for what happened to him are held accountable." Miss Clark nodded, her own determination evident. "I'll do whatever it takes to support the investigation. This isn't just about Andrew. It's about creating a safer environment for every child." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and for the first time in days, Alex and Lauren allowed themselves to relax, sharing stories and laughter with Miss Clark. Her resilience and compassion were inspiring, and Alex found himself reflecting on how much she had taught him, not just as a teacher, but as a person. As they left her room, Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose. He and Lauren returned to Andrew's side, determined to focus on his recovery while continuing to pursue justice. Over the next few days, they worked with Bradley and the legal team, ensuring that the evidence against the bullies and the school was airtight. The media began covering the story, shining a spotlight on the negligence of the school and the bravery of Miss Clark. Public outrage grew, with parents demanding better protections for their children. The school board announced a comprehensive review of their policies, and the principal resigned under mounting pressure. Meanwhile, Andrew's recovery progressed steadily. With each passing day, his strength returned, and so did his confidence. He began to talk openly about his experiences, finding solace in sharing his story with his parents and Miss Clark. By the end of the week, Alex received a call from Bradley. "The charges against the kids have been filed," Bradley said. "Their families have agreed to cover all of Andrew's medical expenses as part of a settlement." Alex thanked him, feeling a sense of closure. Justice had been served, and changes were underway to prevent future incidents. But more importantly, Andrew was safe, surrounded by love and support. That evening, the Carters gathered around Andrew's hospital bed, sharing stories and making plans for the future. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face it together, stronger and more united than ever. For the first time in what felt like forever, hope filled the room, lighting the way forward. The day Andrew was discharged from the hospital, the sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over the Carter family as they stepped outside. Alex carried Andrew's bag while Lauren walked close to her son, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. Andrew moved slowly, still recovering, but his steps were steady, his face lit with a hopeful smile. Despite the challenges he had faced, he looked forward to returning home and resuming the life he thought he had lost. Miss Clark was waiting by the hospital's front entrance. Her face lit up when she saw Andrew, and she waved enthusiastically. "There's my star student," she called out, walking toward them. Andrew grinned and gave her a small wave in return. "Miss Clark, you didn't have to come," Lauren said, though her voice was filled with gratitude. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," Miss Clark replied, kneeling to meet Andrew's gaze. "How are you feeling?" Andrew hesitated before answering. "Better. Thank you for everything you did for me." Miss Clark smiled warmly. "You don't have to thank me, Andrew. You're the brave one. I'm just glad I could help." As they talked, Alex stepped aside to take a call from Bradley. "We've got good news," Bradley said. "The school board has officially adopted stricter anti-bullying policies, and they've appointed a new principal who's committed to enforcing them. The parents of the students involved have agreed to a settlement, and the boys have been transferred to different schools." Alex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That's a step in the right direction," he said. "Thank you for keeping the pressure on." After ending the call, Alex rejoined his family and Miss Clark. "It's time to go home," he announced, his voice filled with relief. The drive home was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence. Andrew gazed out the window, taking in the familiar sights of their neighborhood. When they pulled into the driveway, a group of neighbors stood waiting, holding signs of encouragement and cheering as the family got out of the car. Andrew's face lit up, and he waved shyly at them. "Welcome home, Andrew," one of the neighbors called out. "We're so glad you're okay." Lauren wiped away a tear as she helped Andrew out of the car. "Thank you, everyone," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Inside the house, Andrew settled onto the couch, his favorite blanket draped over him. Lauren brought him a glass of water while Alex sat nearby, his expression thoughtful. "There's something I want to talk to you about," Alex said, his tone gentle. Andrew looked up at him, his expression curious. "What is it, Dad?" Alex took a deep breath. "I know things haven't been easy for you, and I want you to know that I'm sorry for not realizing how bad it had gotten at school. From now on, I promise to listen more, to support you better, and to make sure you never have to face something like this alone again." Andrew's eyes glistened with tears, but he nodded. "Thanks, Dad." Lauren joined them, placing a comforting hand on Andrew's shoulder. "We're so proud of you," she said. "You've shown so much strength through all of this, and we're going to make sure you feel safe and loved every day." As the days turned into weeks, Andrew continued to recover, both physically and emotionally. Miss Clark visited regularly, bringing him books and helping him catch up on schoolwork. She also started working with the new principal to create workshops for students and teachers, ensuring that bullying was addressed openly and effectively. One afternoon, Alex and Lauren sat with Andrew in the living room, watching him laugh at a cartoon on TV. "It's amazing how far he's come," Lauren said softly. Alex nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "He's stronger than I ever realized, and now it's our job to make sure he knows that every single day." Later that evening, the family gathered around the dinner table. Andrew looked at his parents, his voice hesitant but clear. "I've been thinking, maybe I could talk to the other kids at school, tell them what happened and how it made me feel. Maybe it could help them understand why bullying is so wrong." Alex and Lauren exchanged a proud glance. "That's a wonderful idea," Lauren said. "You could help so many people by sharing your story." Miss Clark, who was visiting, added, "You'd be making a difference, Andrew, just like you always do." As the evening continued, the Carters laughed and shared stories, the weight of the past week slowly lifting. Though the scars of what had happened would always remain, they knew they had come through it stronger as a family. Andrew's courage and Miss Clark's selflessness had inspired them all, reminding them of the importance of compassion, resilience, and standing up for what was right. When Andrew went to bed that night, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. His parents tucked him in, and as Alex turned off the light, he whispered, "Good night, buddy. We're so proud of you." "Good night, Dad. I love you," Andrew replied, his voice filled with warmth. As Alex and Lauren left the room, they held hands, their hearts full of gratitude and hope. They knew the road ahead would have its challenges, but they were ready to face them together, with love and determination lighting the way forward. Thank you for watching this powerful story of resilience, kindness, and the fight for justice. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and move hearts. Together, we can create a world of understanding and compassion